Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. I was out last night, so I'm a little bit fucked, but I'm not here to look pretty, am I? So, in Sweden right now, we're having this moronic debate. That shouldn't be a debate in the first place, but nevertheless, it's about if you can be a Swedish Muslim. I mean, and to some people, this is a legitimate question. They don't even understand the contradictions in the question itself. And so today I wanted to speak about this question specifically and the differences and the distinctions between ethnicity, nationality, and religion. All right? And I'm no scholar in this. I'm not like an academic in this area, but it's fucking intuitive, bro. You don't need to be a genius to understand this stuff. It's simple nuance. It's simple. It's easy. So look, people are debating whether you can be a Muslim and Swedish, or if those are contradictory, if they cannot be combined because of some fundamental differences that cannot be reconciled. And there are so many weird things going on in a question like this, because obviously it's asked by racists and xenophobes who don't want to understand the nuance. They just want someone to point to and say, that's my enemy. And it's also very useful for the politicians that use this type of rhetoric to make things really simple for the person who wants someone to blame. But look, I'll go through the basics, right? You have ethnicity. I am ethnically Swedish, I think. I haven't done the DNA test. I want to do that someday. But I mean, my grandparents and stuff did some kind of like genealogy, like looking at our ancestry. There's just fucking poor ass Swedish farmers. There's nothing interesting in my lineage. Just the Swedish farmers. But so yeah, I'm ethnically Swedish. This is in your DNA. This is something you cannot change. I cannot become ethnically Japanese or ethnically Iranian, or you know, any ethnicity. You cannot change your ethnicity. That's in your genome, right? Right. We're on the same page so far, yes? Okay. Now let me introduce this next concept of nationality. So I'm ethnically Swedish, and I've grown up in Sweden. I have, Swedish culture ingrained in me, in a way. Now, nationality is a bit more of a difficult concept to discuss because it's not as easy to point to as skin color or phenotypes that signify you're from a specific ethnicity. But nationality, for me, because I've been thinking about these things for some time, for me, being a part of a nationality is you speak the language, you live there, you engage in the cultures and some of the traditions. Like these are not so much requirements as they are signifiers, if you get what I mean. But I think definitely speaking the language, growing up in a place is definitely a way to say like I'm Swedish. But the thing is as well, if you live here and you work here and you have friends who live here and you spend your time here and you file taxes here, whatever, then it doesn't matter if you grew up here or you immigrated here. If you integrate into a culture, then you can become that nationality. And some people want to, a good signifier that you can point to as a passport, right? But you don't need to be ethnically Swedish to have a Swedish passport. So now you see how these things are separate, right? You can have someone from China whose parents immigrated to Sweden. They became Swedish citizens, and now you have this Chinese boy who has a Swedish passport. He's ethnically Chinese, but he grew up in Sweden. He speaks Swedish, probably doesn't even speak Chinese. What do I know? Maybe that doesn't matter. But anyways, now you have a person who is ethnically Chinese, but nationally Swedish. He feels like a Swede. that is possible. That happens all over the world. If I moved tomorrow to Germany and I learned German and I, wore the Lederhosen and I went to school in Germany, I went to university in Germany and, and I lived there for the rest of my life. I worked there. I had like all the people around me, they're German, right? Then eventually, and I get German citizenship, maybe I marry a German. Then I'm German. But I'm not ethnically German. I can't change my ethnicity. Look, and I'm getting very worked up when I'm talking about this because a lot of people don't understand these simple ass concepts, man. Morons. So look, the next thing I'm gonna bring up adds another dimension to it, and that's religion. And this is where a lot of people go wrong because not only can you kind of mistake ethnicity for nationality, but you can also mistake religion for ethnicity. You can mistake religion for nationality. You can mistake nationality for religion. For example, if you're from Iran and someone says, oh, you're a Muslim, that's not necessarily true. You can be a Christian, you can be a Jew. But religion, everybody knows what religion is. Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism. And, this is another dimension. Let's say this Chinese boy, right? His parents were I don't know what kind of Christianity they practice in China. Let's bring up a different example. Let's say a boy from somewhere in South America, let's say he's from Mexico, right? And when I say from, I mean ethnically Mexican. Let's say two Mexican parents moved to Sweden, had a child. That boy grows up, and now he is a ethnically Mexican Swede, but he's also Christian. But what could also happen is that he's a Muslim. That's the thing as well. Like what if he converted to Islam? Now he's a ethnically Mexican Swedish Muslim. And this is possible. This happens all over the world. And so, again, a lot of people want to assume things. They want to make things very simple, when in fact, things are very rarely that simple. And this is what we see with this question of like, oh, can you be a Muslim and Swedish at the same time? It's like, yes, of course. And it's such a dumb question, but people don't think about these things. They just say like, oh, that guy's brown, so he's a Muslim, so he can't be Swedish, when in fact, he's like a Christian. And this is the problem, right? We have about 1 million people in Sweden from Muslim cultures. And the Sweden I've grown up in is a multicultural Sweden. I've never not lived in a multicultural Sweden. When I went to school, when I go to work, when I walk in the streets, I see people of all ethnicities, all colors, all shapes. But the vast majority of us are all united in that we are Swedes. Not ethnic Swedes, but we are nationally Swedish. We feel Swedish because we've grown up in Sweden. We speak Swedish. We go to Swedish schools. We eat at the same places, whatever, right? We are united in that we are nationally Swedish. Then it doesn't matter so much what your ethnicity is, because you can't change that. It's not up to you. And it becomes extra. Or actually, let me lay out the foundations for what this debate goes like. So basically in Sweden, we have a very big now far-right bloc. And it's very unfortunate because the kind of center-right parties have lost a lot of power. And now the only way for them to cling on to some semblance of power is to ally with the far right. And now, increasingly over the past decade or decades, the far right has demanded more of the center right. And so the center right has been pushed farther and farther out right, not only economically, but culturally, in the rhetoric. Um, and today, if you vote for the center right party, you are essentially voting for the far right. And it's very unfortunate because I have a lot of friends who I love, and they are more to the right than me in terms of economics. And I would be so happy if we had a center right party in Sweden that didn't have to ally with racists and fascists that were just like a little bit more market liberal than me. I would love that. I invite those people every single day of the week, but they don't really exist anymore. And it's so weird. It's so weird. I mean, obviously, some individuals do still exist in politics and in private life, but it's so sad to see and I would even say majority of the people in, at least the politicians, in these traditionally center-right parties, basically just get on their knees for the far right. And now, because every party has, pledged that they would never work with the far right party, which is called the Sweden Democrats. But bit by bit, this red line, as it's called, it's been pushed further and further, and more people have cut these ribbons between the parties, and now you have the so-called liberals cooperating with the Sweden Democrats. And it's it's disgusting to see because it's so dishonest towards the Swedish public, the Swedish voters, and you really see how Swedish society deteriorates and crumbles due to the games of politics. Because when more and more people unite with the far right party and increasingly rely on them, the rhetoric also ramps up. And now you have these questions like, can you be Muslim and Swedish? That's not a question that should be on the agenda. That's a dumb question. But politics have become dumb. And so play stupid games and get stupid prices, I guess. What was I going to say? Right. So increasingly, the far right party has gained control, and now they are demanding more than ever. Now they want a lot of ministry positions. We have an election coming up this fall. Luckily, it seems like people have caught on, and that we're going to get a more left-leaning government. And there's still a lot of trouble with that, but hopefully, at least we don't give power to the far right party. I'm very scared of that, genuinely scared, because what has happened now is that this far right party, the Sweden Democrats, which has its roots in Nazism, so their founders were very anti-Semitic, and actually the founder of, or not the founder of, sorry, the leader of the Sweden Democrats right now, which I think is the most powerful man in Sweden. He's not the prime minister, but he's still the most powerful man. He joined the party, the far right party, the Sweden Democrats, when it was still a neo-Nazi party. And he has followed the party all the way through. They've been very disciplined, mind you. And they have refined themselves a little bit so that, common folk can vote for them and not be called extremists. But now, because politics are very opportunistic, and you have this thing called Zionism, and this guy's a raging Zionist, by the way, and a lot of other top ministry positions in Sweden are also Zionists and have like very troubling pasts. But this guy now no longer hates Jews, obviously, but he hates Muslims. And we've had a lot of immigration to Sweden per capita, and we have taken in a lot of people. And we haven't really been able to deal with that the right way. And we have ended up with segregation. We have ended up with welfare that is kind of breaking in the seams. And it's not been very pleasant. And that has led to a lot of travesties like gang violence and criminality, and obviously the welfare system crumbling. Or at least not living up to the expectations that you would have on Sweden. So and so who is to blame, right? Do you blame the politicians for being reckless, or do you blame companies that are greedy, these neoliberal companies that maximize profit over anything else? No. You know what you do? You blame it on Muslims. You blame it on brown people and black people. And it's very effective. It's an effective strategy that you know the far right uses. It's a populist strategy, you know, just having someone to point at and to blame. And so you have this rhetoric, this scaling rhetoric, which eventually leads to these types of questions, like, can you be Swedish and Muslim? Where obviously, yes, you can, but for them, this becomes a genuine question because they have propagated this idea that Muslims, by and large, don't want democracy. They don't want any type of progressive or liberal values. They want Sharia law. They're all Islamists, which means they want to rule the country with their religion. Like Islamism is political Islam. And it's so dishonest because, again, I don't remember if I mentioned this. We have about 1 million Muslim people with Muslim backgrounds, like from Muslim countries, culturally Muslim, the same way I'm culturally Christian, but I'm an atheist. And you don't need to be an atheist to kind of be a very secular, non-church going Christian, like most people are in Sweden, but I'm just very interested in religion. So, but about 750,000, or actually this is how they do the math, that we have about 1 million people with Muslim cultural backgrounds. About 250,000 of them identify themselves as Muslim. So you have 750,000 people who are basically secular, the same way I'm not Christian, the same way my brother and my sister and my mother and my father, they're not really religious, but we celebrate Christmas and Easter. So yeah, we have a lot of those people in Sweden, but for the Muslim side of it, and of course they are, you know, they're progressive. A lot of their parents or they themselves fled from Islamist regimes. So look, what happens is that you have a huge population of people who are culturally Muslim. And then you say, okay, these people want to take over Sweden. That's not true. That is not true. They are not dangerous. They are not a threat. They don't have any values that are incongruent with Swedish society. They don't really care about whether somebody is gay or not, the same way I don't care if somebody is gay or not, because they don't think like that. They're normal fucking people. Now, of these 250,000 Muslims, a lot of those Muslims are progressive Muslims, liberal Muslims, feminist Muslims. That exists too, but that's nuance that you will not hear from anyone at the moment. Actually, nobody's speaking about this. The fact that, you know, a very little group of Islamist extremists and fundamentalists get to represent the entire Muslim people of Sweden. And it's disgusting. And of the world, frankly, you know, because that's the same thing, you know. Obviously, what you see in media are these cases of extremism. That's what, it's sensationalist media, right? But it's never nuanced in the way that, like, okay, this is a very small sect of Muslims. And what's sad, and this is where we get into some real nuance that some people will not like that much. There is, without a doubt, a lot of regimes around the world, a lot of authoritarian, vicious dictatorships that are Islamist, that use their religion to justify the rule, and they are very fundamentalist. They are, you know, they punish people severely. Obviously, I don't like that. Obviously, I don't like that. There are terrorist organizations that brand themselves as Muslim. Obviously, I don't like terrorism. Um, and so when you start talking about, Islam, and people bring up, oh, look at how many terrorist organizations there are, and Islamist regimes that oppress their people and kill everybody who is a dissident. That's true. That exists. That's deplorable. But then you also need to understand why that appears. And then we start getting into the real nitty and gritty of imperialism, of resistance, of the people, the oppressed people finding an alternative from the West, being under the Western boot, right? And I'm not saying that the alternative is better, but they want some semblance of liberation, obviously. I mean, look at Iran. Everybody was backing the Ayatollah when he came in 79, from communists to the Islamists, because they did not want the Shah. Now, turns out that the Ayatollah did not want to lead a democratic regime, or a democratic country. Instead, it was a dictatorship. And now we've seen what has happened with Iran, and the people aren't happy, obviously. Or a lot of people aren't happy with how the people have been treated. But it becomes this very complex situation where, on the one hand, you have anti-Western sentiments, but then on the other hand, you are also being oppressed, and both of these are happening at the same time. And so it's a little bit difficult to make sense of stuff sometimes. But what you also need to understand is that, and what I'm trying to get to, is that the reason a lot of these terrorist organizations and regimes, that the reason they exist, is a pendulum swing to the other side, to counter the Western imperialist venture. And it becomes simply a resistance to this oppression. And I'm not putting any valuations, I'm not moralizing this, I'm just saying this is how it works, this is how it happens. And so that's what you also need to understand, that although you have all of these terrorist organizations, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Hamas, Hezbollah, they emerge as a consequence of something else. It's not that Islam is inherently terroristic or extremist. And I'll say that again, because that's actually the central point. Islam is not a monolith. It has a thousands of years long history, or about 1,400. And in that time, it has taken all kinds of shapes and sizes. And it is unfair to brand Islam as a extremist, terrorist religion, just by looking at these instances of terrorism, which again do exist, but we also need to understand why they appear. And so it's really disgusting, it's despicable when Swedish politicians and influencers brand Islam as a whole as terroristic and revolutionary. They want to take over the government, whatever. Because I've been out on the streets. I'm an on the streets guy, right? Actually, when I go to people and speak to them, I've been in mosques, I've been in churches, I've been all over Stockholm, right? And so I went to this one thing called a manifestation for Sweden. And so it was not a protest, it was not a demonstration, but it was a manifestation. And all they did was that basically they went to the city center of Stockholm. It's called the plateau or whatever. It's like a divot in the ground before you go into the subway system. and it's basically a big plaza where a lot of kind of demonstrations and things take place. And so they stood there, quiet, peaceful, and they just held up Swedish flags of Sweden. And I saw a very influential Swedish political influencer go there and talk to them a little bit. And I saw through it immediately, obviously, and a lot of people also saw through it, that these people, people know what they want. They're not out on the streets saying, we hate Muslims, get them out of the country. They're just holding up Swedish flags. But we know what they want. We know what they mean, right? We know what they mean. And so I went there and I filmed. And again, they were very peaceful and quiet. And that's also what gives them legitimacy, right? That they're not out here screaming something. They're just standing here, but we know what they mean. And so I knew that if I went to the people at the front, the organizers of this manifestation, they wouldn't tell me anything. They would just tell me, oh, and I actually went to them after I talked to some people in the back, because that's where I started. I knew that I wouldn't get any response from the people in front. So I went all the way to the back, where people, you almost couldn't see them because they were behind big Swedish flags. And I talked to them because I knew that they would not have their guard up in the same way. And also the way I look, they might think, I'm on their team. So I went up to them and I recorded a little bit of this, but I didn't really get any good footage. I was trying to be like a fucking, Channel 5, Andrew Callahan type of guy, bro. That did not work out that well because I didn't have the confidence to do it. But I spoke to them. And obviously that's where things spilled out. That's where the truth was revealed about this manifestation, as it's called. And basically they were there because they were afraid that the Muslims were going to take over the country, that they want Sharia law, that they are terrorists, that if we allow them into our democracy, they will eventually corrupt it from the inside and then perform a revolution. That's what they genuinely believed. And they came to me with, and this is very common for far-right and populism in general, they come to you with these very specific examples of obviously horrendous things. And like very anti-democratic, anti-progressive things that have at some point or another happened or are happening even. But that like any rational person would understand that this is not what the average Muslim in Sweden advocates for. And again, people don't even understand what Sharia law means. But they would come to you and say like, oh, did you know that in this specific book of, not even the Hadith or the Quran, but some other thing. And they were like, oh, did you know that yada, yada, yada. And I don't even actually remember exactly what it said, but something that's like obviously not good. And they were like, yeah, every Muslim wants this. Every single one. Okay, buddy. So, and look, I didn't say okay, buddy, to them because I wanted them to keep talking. I wanted to hear as much as possible. And so I stood there and I just listened and I talked to some more people. I got a little circle going of people and some people spoke. And then eventually this older man came and he was, really passionate about this. And he was telling me all about the Muslim world and how they were fucked in the head and whatever. And so, obviously I already knew that was what it was about. But I just needed to go there for confirmation, to just be on the streets and really like hear these things. And so then I went to the front after I had those conversations in the back. I went to the front and I tried to talk to the people in front, like the people who were in charge. And they gave me, of course, the predictable answer, the answer that they had trained to give, probably like, no, we just love the country of Sweden. We're here because we just wanna cherish Sweden. That's why we have the Swedish flags, and obviously they were very careful not to correlate this manifestation with any kind of anti-Muslim sentiment or anti-immigration sentiment. But then I asked them also, like, oh, yeah, I also love Sweden, right? We're on the same page. I also love Sweden. What about Sweden is it that you love? And to one guy, I even begun like this. Yeah, like for me, I love Sweden because it's so multicultural and like because we can all get along and because of like the welfare that takes care of everybody. And these people aren't that smart. They're pretty dumb, most of them, that go to these types of things. And so, bless their hearts, they did not know how to answer that. And they were like just quiet. Because obviously when you're a far right person, you can't really stand up for what you believe because it's not sane. And so I didn't get any answers from that. But then in some cases, I didn't go all the way. And I just said, yeah, I love Sweden too. What do you love about Sweden? Or what is Sweden to you? And then I got varying answers. Some people saw through me and they just said, no, I just love the flag, just the flag. Okay. And so obviously I understood that they saw through my question. But some people mentioned some things, or like when they didn't know what to answer, I said like, oh yeah, I love like free school lunches. That's something, that we are proud of as Swedes, and they agreed with me. But and what to note there was that when I gave these examples of what makes Sweden good, it was never anything about immigration. It was never anything about that. I never said like, oh yeah, and I love Sweden because it's so ethnically pure. Like I didn't say that. I never brought up any of that. And so we just stood there agreeing on why Sweden was so good without them bringing up even why they were there, fundamentally. I don't know if I phrased that the right way, but I think you get what I mean. So I was there, experienced that. And these are the type of people, right, that... And actually, yesterday I watched an incredible podcast about these things. These topics, especially about the question of can you be Muslim and Swedish. And a guy brought up, he was like studying like social psychology or something, and he was Muslim. And he brought up this concept of like securitizing. I don't know if I can translate it that way, but like when you put kind of a label on a group of people that you kind of just mutually understand without needing to communicate it, like say something. I don't know how to phrase this properly, but look, in Sweden right now, when you have that kind of manifestation where they're not saying anything on the surface, they're just holding up Swedish flags. But because we have this environment where there's a label on Muslims and a subconsciously understood label on Muslims that they are not welcome in Sweden, you immediately understand what these people mean when they are just standing there with Swedish flags. It's incredibly provocative. And another thing that was really funny that actually happened later that day was there was a protest against the Swedish government for their involvement with the UAE, because this was when the kind of news were coming out about South Sudan and the RFS and or RSF and that stuff, And that was on a different plaza in southern Stockholm. And some people from the Sweden manifestation had come to this protest as well, but obviously not to partake in it, but to kind of oppose it. And because the people who were protesting for the rights of the South Sudanese people, they were mostly African, and they were, making a lot of noise, obviously, as you should do in a protest. And there were some like camera crews there from news stations doing some interviews, and I was just walking around, and you had this group of people, not a big group of people, like 4 people maybe, that were holding up a Swedish flag, like at the outskirts of this protest. And because I had been there earlier that day at their manifestation, I knew immediately, and I was like, this is gonna be so funny, right? So I went to them, and I said like, oh, hi, yeah. So like, what are you partaking in the protest? And they were like, no. So it's like, okay, but what are you doing here? And they were like, oh, we're just standing here, which is obviously the answer I knew I was going to get. And I was like, oh yeah, but why are you holding the Swedish flag? And they said like, oh, because we love Sweden. And then I played this on them. Yeah, I love it how, by you standing here with the Swedish flag, you're associating this protest with Sweden. Because that's what we want to do, right? We want to make clear that Sweden stands up for the rights of the South Sudanese people. So by you standing here holding up the flag, you're really solidifying this connection between, the self-determination of a foreign people and the country of Sweden, because that we believe in that. And they got very confused about what I said, but then I think they understood what I meant. And then I walked away, and then like 5 minutes later they left. So that was funny. That was very funny. But now I've kind of rambled for, 36 minutes. That's crazy. Let's get back to the core of it. Can you be a Swedish Muslim? Yes, because being Swedish, which is a nationality, and being Muslim, which is a religion, they are not contradictory. You can be a Swedish Muslim. Now, what a lot of people don't understand here is that when you say Swedish, I don't mean ethnically Swedish, I mean nationally Swedish. Can you be an ethnically Swedish Muslim? Yes. I have a lot of friends who have converted to Islam, who are ethnically Swedish. And so how do you deal with that then? Well, are they Swedish? Yeah. And this is where it becomes very difficult, because the crux of the far-right position here is that the definition of being Swedish is very nebulous. Because on the one hand, if you look like me, for example, you're Swedish kind of by default. But then within the far-right party, you have these people who are not ethnically Swedish, who obviously want to portray themselves as Swedish, because they are part of the far-right party, and they're like, oh, I'm the good immigrant. You have those types of that archetype all over the world, right? I'm the good immigrant. Like, I'm with you guys. I'm not with those, what's it called? Barbarians, with those uncivilized people. I'm with you guys. And so you have this very famous influencer, the same one that went to the manifestation that inspired me to go there. He's a far-right influencer. He's very short, and he had an interview with a far-right guy, an ethnically Swedish far-right guy, and he said kind of jokingly, right, like, "Oh, I'm not on your list of people to send out of the country," right? Like in a joking way, he said that, and the guy, he asked, like a bald, kind of skinhead white guy. He paused. He hesitated. He was like, well, and it was so fucking funny, because now this, like, the influencer guy, he's like, oh, well, I'm far down on the list, right? Like, I'm not, okay, but I'm far down on the list, right? And it was like, I guess you're far down on the list then. It was so telling how, even though he has tried everything to be Swedish, he speaks perfect Swedish, he partakes in Swedish culture, he only moves with like ethnically Swedish people, he still isn't Swedish to them. Because he can't be, because he's not ethnically Swedish. And the thing is, he's not Swedish to them. To me, he is perfectly Swedish. And it's so paradoxical because the people he's trying to, cater to, like pander to, they don't accept him. Bro, I accept you. I don't agree with you politically, but you're Swedish. You're definitely Swedish. Nationally Swedish. You're not ethnically Swedish. That's not how that works, but you're Swedish. And if you want to be a Muslim, then you can be a Swedish Muslim. So it's very funny, man. And it's not funny, it's tragic, but it's comical. So again, it's this thing where the far right doesn't know what it means to be Swedish. They can't define it. And fundamentally, to be Swedish means to be ethnically Swedish to them. And so, yeah. Man, I just hope we get some sensible forces in Swedish politics. And to kind of summarize, because now I don't want to drag it too much. Let's summarize this. There's ethnicity, there's nationality, and there's religion. These three things are distinct things. You can have different answers for all these three questions in one individual, right? And oh man, there's more stuff I want to talk about. This is so sad. You know what? Fuck it. This video might be an hour long. I don't care anymore. Okay. So, because I always go on these tangents and I want to get back to the core of what I was trying to say, which is basically, why are they saying that you cannot be a Muslim and Swedish? That you cannot be a Swedish Muslim? Why are they saying this? What makes them say this? Well, first of all, of course, is the political capital of having someone to point out as your enemy. But like, what are the arguments they're using? And it's basically that we have also this very nebulous concept called Swedish values or Western values. And those are things that we need to uphold, like democracy, like liberal and progressive values, individual liberties. And then you have this other thing, this religion called Islam, which in their explanations, at least, is an opponent to these values. And so essentially they're saying that there's a clash of values and that it's not congruent. And that if you want to be Swedish, you need to adopt these liberal values. And that if you are Muslim, you are automatically against these values. This is the contradiction they're trying to portray. That if you're Swedish, there's a certain set of values you must hold. And if you are Muslim, there's a certain set of values you must hold. And they contradict each other. And so, by definition, you cannot be Swedish and Muslim. But obviously, both of these are fallacies. There are Swedish people that have vastly different ways of thinking that are more or less liberal. And there are Muslims that are vastly different, more or less liberal. So, for example, for me, if my skin was brown, they would refuse to call me Swedish. Because I have, well, it depends. Look, if somebody is, okay, let me gather my thoughts here. Basically, I can say whatever I want and still be Swedish. I can say whatever I want and still be Swedish because I look like this. They cannot take that away from me. Or like, even if if you would ask them, is he Swedish? They would have to say yes. Because I'm ethnically Swedish and they don't understand it. Anyways. they would have to say yes because I look like this. But if somebody did not look like me and said the same things I'm saying, they would not want that person to be Swedish. They would say, no, you're not Swedish. And it yeah, this is why it confuses me, my brain, because obviously you have these types of people who are not ethnically Swedish, but still fit into kind of the progressive and liberal values that they say are Swedish values. But obviously, if they had it their way, Sweden would be an ethno-state. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is that whether you're Swedish, basically, depending on what you say, if you're not ethnically Swedish, then depending on what you say, you're Swedish. Depending on your political position, then you can be Swedish. And if you don't have the right values, if you don't say the right things, if you don't have the right political convictions, then you cannot be Swedish. And this ambivalence is it's not congruent with a liberal democracy and kind of a society where we all are held to the same standard. Because if and this is the thing as well with people who have converted to Islam that are ethnically Swedish, and some people who have converted to Islam who are very fundamentalistic, who are very, who are very extreme in their conservatism, but they're ethnically Swedish. If somebody asks, is that guy Swedish, to the far right, again, they have no choice but to say, yes, he's Swedish. Look at him. But if he was not ethnically Swedish, if he was ethnically Iraqi, they would say, no, he's not Swedish. And that's the crux of it. They only care about your ethnicity. I'm sorry to break it to you. If you are not ethnically Swedish in Sweden and you support the far right, or again, basically any of the right parties because they're all allied with and dependent on the far right, if you support the right bloc of Swedish politics, then they hate you too. They don't want you in the country. No matter what you do, they will, in the end, not want you. And I'm sorry to break it to you, but that's the truth. And so it's very sad. It's very sad. And the thing with the other very funny thing that is also visible in geopolitics, or like in international politics, is that the far right, who are very keen on preaching Western values, Swedish values, liberal values, and who claim that the country is under threat because of Muslims who don't hold the same values, those same far-right people will say, for example, oh, the Muslims, if you're gay in a Muslim country, they'll kill you. They'll say that and be like, oh, look at these Muslims, they're dangerous, they're a threat to our liberal society. These same far-right people do not go to the pride parades, or if they go, they're there to ridicule the people who participate in the parade. And this cognitive dissonance is unbelievable. They don't care about the rights of LGBTQ people. They care about having political authority and, and purging the country of other ethnicities and religions. That's all they want. They don't care about... It's the same thing of like, how it's called pink washing, I think. I was listening to the No Politic Here podcast, and it was an episode about pink washing and how, and this is what I was talking about with geopolitics and international politics. In Israel, or like some of the propaganda made in favor of Israel says like, oh, Israel is the only place in the Middle East where you can be gay. And it's like these American politicians that bring up this argument that, oh, Israel is the only place in the Middle East where the LGBTQ people are welcome. They're not welcome in the US. This same far-right politician who is a Zionist, who says, again, that the only place gay people are safe is in Israel, they would most likely not allow gay marriage if they had it their way. So again, cognitive dissonance all over the board, and it goes for more things than just the LGBTQ rights, women's rights, for example. I mean, these people who are very conservative, who, again, if they had it their way, would not allow women to be as present in public and political life as they are. They would gladly suppress their voices. And of course, they would never say that. But if we were in the 1950s, let's say, or even earlier in Sweden, and we had these feminist liberation movements, on which side would they be? Huh? On which side do you think they'd be? These conservative guys, these far-right guys. Obviously, they would be against it. Obviously, they would not be on the side of the women's liberation movements. And so again, there's cognitive dissonance. They go to the Muslims, or they point at the Muslims and they say, look how they are suppressing their women. But then in their own country, they're conservative. It's very strange. It's very, very, very strange. And I think that we would do good in pointing out these contradictions more often and being more clear to the people about these guys are opportunists. They don't actually hold any real ideological positions. They just want political power. They just want, or I mean, they hold some kind of ideological positions that are racist and xenophobic and ethno-supremacist ideologies. But yeah, I mean, man. And it's so sad that, again, that the center-right doesn't exist anymore. It's very sad. Very, very sad.